On October 24th, 1999, James Davis conducted an interview with the last known patient of Ashwood Sanatorium, Clara Bennett, on her deathbed. What she told him in the interview was more horrifying than you could imagine. "We will arrive soon enough," the driver told me. "Just do as they say and you'll be happy, healthy, and out of there in no time." Paranoid schizophrenic, they had labeled me. They decided that Ashwood Sanatorium was the best place for me, and that I can't imagine the depth of silence that existed there. It was a silence that could swallow you whole, leaving nothing behind but the echo of your own thoughts. That's what they promised me, at least. A reprieve from the cacophony in my head, a chance to start fresh. But there's a fine line between silence and erasure, a line I was about to learn all too well. Ashwood stood isolated, a monolith against a backdrop of twisted pines and perpetual fog. The kind of place you'd expect to find at the end of the world, not just an hour's drive from the city. Its walls, thick with ivy, held the kind of weight that stories of despair often do. I remember thinking, as the car rolled up the gravel path, that the building itself seemed to be holding its breath, waiting for something, or someone. The staff greeted me with sterile smiles, the kind that didn't quite reach their eyes. Their hands were gentle but firm, guiding me through the endless, dimly lit corridors. The air was heavy, filled with a scent I couldn't place, something between antiseptic and age. It was quiet, the kind of quiet that makes your ears ring and your heart beat a little too loudly in your chest. My room was a small, Spartan space with a single window barred and a bed bolted to the floor. They told me it was for my safety, a precaution against the turmoil within. I didn't believe them, not really. It felt more like a cell than a sanctuary, a place designed to keep me in rather than to keep the world out. The first few days passed in a blur of routine. Meals delivered to my door, medication rounds, brief interactions with the staff. They asked me questions, lots of them, about my thoughts, my feelings, my fears. I answered as best I could, but it felt like speaking into the void. They nodded, took notes, and left me alone with the silence once more. It was during one of these early days that I first heard about the quiet room. Another patient, a man with haunted eyes and a voice that barely rose above a whisper, mentioned it during lunch. He said it was a place of healing, a room where you could confront your innermost demons in the absence of all distraction. I was skeptical, but intrigued. The idea of a room that could strip away the noise in my head, leaving only clarity, was tempting. The temptation faded the first time they took me there. The quiet room was as described, a small, padded space devoid of any stimulus. No windows, no sounds, not even the hum of electricity. The door closed with a soft click, and I was enveloped in a darkness so complete, it felt tangible. I could feel it pressing against my eyes, crawling under my skin. At first, it was almost peaceful. The constant barrage of thoughts that plagued me seemed to slow, then stutter, in the absence of external input. But as the minutes stretched into what felt like hours, that peace twisted into something else entirely. The darkness began to pulse, a rhythm that matched my racing heart. The silence, once a balm, turned oppressive, a weight on my chest that made it hard to breathe. I started to see things in the blackness, shapes that moved just beyond the edge of perception. Whispers filled my ears, voices that weren't quite voices, speaking words I couldn't understand. I told myself it was just my mind playing tricks, a natural reaction to sensory deprivation. but knowing that didn't make it any less terrifying. When the door finally opened, flooding the room with the harsh, fluorescent light of the hallway, I stumbled out, gasping for air. The staff member who escorted me back to my room offered a placating smile, telling me it was a good start, that it would get easier with time. I didn't believe her. Something in the way the shadows clung to the corners of the hallway, the way the silence seemed to follow me, told me it would only get worse. I spent the rest of the day and most of the night staring at the ceiling, jumping at every creak and whisper of the sanatorium. The quiet room had opened something in me, a door I didn't know how to close, and behind that door, something was waiting, biding its time. The next few days were a testament to the staff's persistence. Despite my protests, by force they took me back to the quiet room, each session longer than the last. Each visit stripped away another layer of my sanity, leaving me raw and exposed. The things I saw in the darkness grew more vivid, more aggressive. The whispers turned into screams, into laughter, into sobs, all in my mind. Or so I thought. I tried to tell the doctors, to explain that the quiet room wasn't helping, that it was making me worse, but they just nodded, scribbled in their notebooks, and told me it was all part of the process. Healing, they said, wasn't supposed to be easy. It was supposed to hurt. But this wasn't healing. This was something else entirely, something dark and twisted. And as I lay in my bed listening to the silence of Ashwood Sanatorium, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone, that the quiet room had followed me, seeping into the walls, the floors, the very air I breathed. It was in that moment, in the depths of the night, that I realized the truth. Ashwood wasn't a place of healing. It was a place of breaking, of bending, of reshaping, and I was just the latest in a long line of souls to be molded by its hands. The question wasn't whether I would survive Ashwood. It was what I would become by the time I left, if I ever left at all. The weeks blurred into a singular, continuous nightmare. Each visit to the quiet room peeled layers from my psyche, revealing fears I never knew I harbored. The staff's demeanor shifted subtly, their once sterile smiles now carrying a hint of sadistic anticipation. It was as if they fed on the terror the quiet room instilled in us, a grotesque nourishment for their soulless routines. The horrors weren't confined to the quiet room. They bled into every corner of Ashwood, tainting interactions, turning whispered conversations into paranoid confessions. I wasn't the only one unraveling. The entire ward seemed on the brink of a collective madness. Patients who once greeted me with nods now averted their gaze, as if afraid of what they might see in mine, or perhaps wary of revealing their own descent into despair. The staff's treatment grew increasingly cruel, a reflection of the institution's malevolent heart. Restraints were used more liberally, not just for those who lashed out in confusion and fear, but for anyone who dared question the sanctity of their methods. Solitary confinement became a regular punishment, a dark echo of the quiet room's isolation. But in solitary, the shadows whispered louder, and the darkness clung tighter, as if empowered by the sanatorium's approval. One night, a scream shattered the oppressive silence, a raw, primal sound that seemed to emanate from the very walls. It was followed by a cacophony of shouts and cries, a symphony of terror that no amount of padding could muffle. The staff scrambled, their usual composure replaced by frantic energy as they sought to quell the uprising of fear. But the damage was done. I later found out that a man in his mid-40s gouged out his own eyes with a teaspoon in a desperate attempt to vanquish his unwelcomed hallucinations, brought on by the quiet room and the other various inhumane attempts the staff had made to cure him. The veil of pretended normalcy Ashwood wore had slipped, revealing the monstrous truth beneath. In the days that followed, the atmosphere grew heavier, charged with a palpable dread. The staff doubled down on their efforts to maintain control, but there was a sense of desperation to their actions now. They knew something fundamental had shifted, a line crossed from which there was no return. It was during this time that I was taken to the quiet room again, despite my pleas and screams. I was screaming and crying, but they didn't care. They drugged me by the hair and slammed the door shut, sealing me in darkness. But this time, the silence was different. It was alive, breathing, a suffocating presence that filled the room. The shadows moved with purpose, coalescing into forms that were almost human, but twisted, wrong in ways that words failed to capture. The voices were clearer now, no longer disjointed murmurs, but coherent, taunting voices. They spoke of despair, of the futility of hope, of the inevitability of surrender. They promised an end to the pain, a release from the torment. If only I would let go, let the darkness in. I fought against their seduction, against the part of me that yearned for it to end. But with each passing moment, my resolve weakened. The horror wasn't just around me, it was within. A seed planted by Ashwood that had taken root and now threatened to consume me. When the door finally opened, releasing me from the tangible nightmare, I was changed. The part of me that had clung to the hope of escape, of salvation, had been eroded by the relentless tide of despair. I returned to my room a shell, moving through the motions of existence but devoid of life. The sanatorium's true purpose had been revealed, not as a place of healing, but as a crucible designed to break the human spirit, to remake it into something twisted and dark. And I, like so many before me, was succumbing to its design. As I lay in my bed, staring into the darkness, I understood the true horror of Ashwood. It wasn't the quiet room, the cruel treatments, or even the sadistic staff. It was the realization that the sanatorium was a reflection of the darkest parts of the human soul, a manifestation of our capacity for cruelty and despair. And the most terrifying truth of all was that, within its walls, I was becoming a part of it. As the days melded into a singular, unending nightmare, the fabric of my reality frayed at the edges. The quiet room, once a mere chamber of horrors, had evolved into a symbol of my complete and utter capitulation to Ashwood. The darkness within those padded walls became my world, a realm where the whispered promises of oblivion were a siren call I no longer had the strength to resist. The staff's demeanor, once cloaked in a veneer of clinical detachment, now revealed its true nature. Their treatments, increasingly barbaric, were not methods of healing but rituals of degradation, designed to strip away the remnants of our humanity. Their eyes gleamed with a malevolent satisfaction at our suffering, a reflection of the sanatorium's insidious essence. Patients vanished with chilling regularity. Their absences explained away as transfers or miraculous recoveries. But I knew deep down they were dead. No one left the walls of Ashwood alive. The empty beds were a grim testament to the finality of Ashwood's treatment, a reminder that the release from Ashwood was a luxury afforded to none. In this relentless cycle of despair, a perverse form of acceptance took root within me. The fight, the desire for freedom, had been extinguished, replaced by a hollow resignation. The sanatorium's oppressive walls, the suffocating silence, the ever-present shadows, all had become familiar, a grotesque parody of home. The defining moment of my surrender came not with fanfare but with a whisper, a realization that dawned in the depths of my broken psyche. There would be no dramatic escape, no last-minute rescue. Ashwood was not a place one left. It was a place where souls were consumed, digested by the endless hunger of its dark heart. The staff, sensing my capitulation, bestowed upon me a twisted form of favoritism. My visits to the quiet room became less frequent, replaced by sessions in which I was paraded as a model patient, a testament to the efficacy of their methods. But the accolades were ashes in my mouth, a bitter reminder of the cost of my survival. In the end, Ashwood did not release its hold on me. Instead, it claimed me entirely, my identity subsumed by the institution's malevolent will. I became a part of its legacy, a living monument to its power to break and reshape the human spirit. The final chapter of my story was written not in the light of day, but in the shadows of an existence that had ceased to be my own. I wandered the halls of Ashwood, a spectre haunting the place of my undoing, my presence a warning to those who came after me. The sanatorium continued its macabre dance of death and madness, indifferent to the fates of those within its grasp. As for me, I was lost, a fragment of a soul adrift in a sea of darkness. The quiet room, once a chamber of terror, had become a refuge, the only place where the whispers of my former self could still be heard. But even those whispers were fading, drowned out by the cacophony of Ashwood's unending horror. In the end, there was no escape from Ashwood Sanatorium. It consumed me, body and soul, until nothing remained but a shell, a husk of the person I once was. And as the darkness claimed me for its own, the last flicker of hope extinguished, I understood then that I was finally healed. And now I will find my way back to the quiet room for all eternity. Soon, I am home. On November 1st that same year, Clara Bennett took her last breath at 83 years old. 25 years she had been forced to endure the horrors of Ashwood Sanatorium before the government realized what was going on there and shut the place down in 1981. For more scary horror stories, please consider leaving a like and subscribing.